For the first time since the Empire invaded the labyrinth, we faced a real loss. Even Adalmann and Alberto were overpowered by the Imperial Guardians. But the true terror of the labyrinth hasn't even begun, because Apito is willing to sacrifice everything to stop them, and Zegion is finally making his move. AI Anime and Manga presents. Before we witness this desperate battle, please take a second to like the video, leave a comment below, and subscribe for the next part of the story. It really helps the channel reach the right audience. Patreon members also get upcoming episodes before public release, while helping cover the AI narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and rendering that keep this project growing. Now, let's head back down into the labyrinth. So all was well on floor 60. But what about floor 70? Around 100 people were huddled together in that hilly wasteland. They had been confused at first, but a day later they were calmer. They had pitched their tents on a hilltop with a good view, and a few of them had been sent out as scouts. There was no sign of an immediate offensive. They were being very cautious. Their composure was pretty impressive, especially considering we had tossed their commander onto an entirely different floor. These really were heroes head and shoulders above the rest. I thought they would be more upset about this, I said. Benimaru answered without much concern.
This is about what I would expect. They have established a clear chain of command, so they can maintain order even if they lose their commander.
Unlike me, Benimaru was pretty indifferent about it. A disjointed chain of command made any mission impossible. Any force needed someone in charge, and I could sympathize with anybody who wanted that role clearly defined. But this was supposed to be a hodgepodge of heroes who had never worked together before. If they could organize this quickly, then hats off to them, I guess. Are we good in that respect? I asked.
Of course. Goboy is always around if I am not, and she has many fine people under her as well. Tactical theory is a required subject for all members of Team Kurenai, so any one of us could feasibly serve as commander.
Whoa, nice confidence there. I never learned any of that. When did they? Well, great. So if they are not making any moves right now, what is up with them? I decided to leave our chain of command in the capable hands of Benimaru and the other core leaders. There was no point in me worrying about it, so I brought the conversation back to the army camped out on floor 70.
For now, they are likely investigating whether there are any survivors on the other floors. Along those lines, I am afraid it is hard luck for them. They might have found some on other floors, but there will not be a trace here.
Benimaru sounded almost like he pitied them. It made sense. I knew there were no survivors among the Imperial army in the labyrinth, but they had to be down here partly to find their friends. I could understand wanting to track down survivors and strengthen their ranks. We all knew that was pointless, though, and in the meantime, it was not much fun to just sit and wait for them to do something. Should we have Adalmann attack them? I asked. Xian nodded at my casual suggestion. She must have been getting pretty bored, not to mention eager to kick some ass. As long as we had ample forces in the labyrinth, she still had to bodyguard me here, and she understood that. But I was sure she wanted to get this over with and join the battle outside. Benimaru chuckled at Xian's reaction.
Well, I doubt we will get anything more on them by watching them like this.
Then I sent an order to Adalmann, who responded immediately. His voice came back full of theatrical devotion. Behold my grand actions, my master. Sounded like Xian was not the only one itching for a fight. Adalmann had his forces ready for the Empire too. They had enjoyed a long streak of victories, and it sounded like they wanted to keep the momentum going with one final win. Okay, I told him. Best of luck. Adalmann answered with even more enthusiasm. Yes, master. That bit of encouragement was the one signal he needed. Like a raging current, Adalmann's army opened the gate and set off. 1 hour later, we were greeted with a pretty astonishing sight. There were only 3 survivors left in the Imperial force, but only 3 survivors on our side too. Adalmann, Alberto, and the Death Dragon. Now it was 3 on 3. The other 100 or so soldiers had fought the undead forces, killing them but losing their lives in the process, so there were no reinforcements for Adalmann's side. His regular army of undead would revive in 3 hours though, so I figured victory was in the bag by then. But Diablo's voice curled with rare interest.
What an interesting person.
Xion sounded just as excited.
Yes, very impressive fighting. I would love to take a crack at him.
That was some rare praise from Diablo and Xion. The enemy had some real winners among them after all. 3 even. One was a dashing sword fighter currently locked in combat with Alberto. One was a beautiful wizard matching Adalmann blow for blow in a magic battle. Finally, one was a burly warrior holding back the death dragon all by herself. They had familiar-looking glowing armor that they summoned out of nowhere, so I assumed they were connected to the legend-class man Testarossa had killed earlier. The armor all shared the same design. They had to belong to the same organization. Benimaru studied the sword fight and gave his judgment.
That sword fighter is fiendishly strong. An even match for Alberto, I would say.
Alberto and the dashing man were exchanging god-tier blows at a level 1 almost never saw. Both fought with sword and shield, and both were definitely making a good fight of it. Like Benimaru said, it was an even match. In fact, the guy seemed stronger than the one Testarossa beat. Diablo needled Adalmann from the safety of the viewing room.
I think Adalmann's faith in you is slipping, failing to keep up with someone like that in magic.
Xion corrected him at once.
No need to be so harsh, Diablo. That armor protects him from magic of all elements, whether holy or evil. It is no wonder Adalmann is at a disadvantage.
Xion's commentary was right. Adalmann had holy evil inversion, but that legend-class armor was completely unfair. It resisted magic almost perfectly, and it would take something as powerful as disintegration to destroy it. That spell was in Adalmann's wheelhouse, but his opponent was not letting him use it. Both sides were trying to make the other one slip first, so it looked like that magic duel would drag on. And I definitely could not forget the last one. The burly warrior knew she probably could not defeat the death dragon for good. Its regeneration was too much, so she kept fighting humbly, trusting her companions to secure their own victories. If it were not for that behind-the-scenes effort, this would have been over long ago. The death dragon was too much for even Soe to defeat, so if she could hold her own against it, she was more trouble than I expected. So how do you think it will turn out? I asked. Benimaru answered first.
Alberto is the superior fighter, but given his gear disadvantage, he is going to lose this battle.
Diablo followed with his own prediction.
Adalmann is trying to grab victory too quickly. If he could approach this with a cooler head, he would have won by now. But as is, he lacks a decisive factor. If Alberto is defeated in the meantime, Adalmann will be overwhelmed fast.
And then Xion gave the most Xion answer possible.
There is no such thing as defeat. Only victory shall be ours.
That all made logical sense except for Xion. Benimaru and Diablo both saw Adalmann and Alberto losing. Xion sounded like she was attempting psychological warfare or something. It was more of a wish than an opinion, but it was very much in character. Okay, I said. So we lose this round? Is that trouble? Benimaru remained confident.
Even if they do lose, we still have the other dungeon marvels on hand. Besides, I can beat them, so we should be just fine.
Xion added her own confidence immediately.
Of course, and I can beat them too, so please do not worry, Sir Rimuru.
I would have liked to ask Xion for evidence, but I doubted she had any. Still, I was glad for the spirit. Then Diablo gave the reassurance that mattered most.
There is no need for concern, Sir Rimuru. Among the marvels, we still have Zegion, Sir Veldora's disciple. As long as he remains in the game, I believe you have nothing to be bothered about.
Diablo ended it with another small laugh. It was rare for him to praise other people, so that reassured me a bit. Maybe everything really would be okay. As we spoke, the match approached its climax. I hoped Adalmann's side might find a way to win if they had more time, but the enemies must have been thinking the same thing. The dashing swordsman shouted at Alberto that he had hoped to push right through him, but if Alberto was going to die now, he could at least boast in hell about how much he had riled him up. Did he have some secret move under wraps? Before ending it, the 3 survivors introduced themselves. The sword fighter was Krishna, a knight of the Empire and the 17th ranked Imperial Guardian. The wizard was Rhea, ranked 94th. The burly warrior was Bazan, ranked 35th. Ah, so they were Imperial Guardians. Gadora had told me about them, but they really did have a great lineup. The man Testarossa beat was ranked 11th, but Krishna looked like the better fighter to me. Maybe the numbers did not directly match actual ability. Judging by Reiha's upper crust bearing compared to Bazan, my hunch was probably right. After the name exchange, Adalmann's side rallied a little, but sadly no dice. Krishna versus Alberto decided it. Krishna's style involved extended combat, gradually damaging his opponent's weapon until he could smash it apart. Alberto's cursed sword was a fine piece from Kurobi, and it was the best weapon Alberto could wield, but it was still facing a legend-class blade. Once Krishna shattered it, Alberto was defeated. With his stout partner gone, Adalmann fell into a worse position. He held his ground surprisingly well, with defensive moves you would not expect from a rearguard fighter, but soon he was overpowered and brought to his knees. Then it became 3-on-1 against the Death Dragon, and before long the dragon was gone too. If Alberto's sword had not broken, I was sure it would have turned out differently. A magician should not be expected to compete against a warrior in physical combat, so I was going to pin the blame for this on the gear. In fact, I should praise all of them for drawing out the enemy's inner workings for us. Still, things ended exactly as Benimaru and Diablo predicted. The enemy now had 2 more keys. No helping that, Krishna's 3-person party had dealt us the first truly bitter defeat of this campaign. Well, we could do a post-mortem on that encounter later. Time to move on. The big screen was now showing a dual simulcast of the battles on floors 79 and 90, and both seemed to be reaching their climax. Kumara, I had to say, was really taking things to extremes. I suppose she was out for revenge against that bearded guy though, so it only made sense. Apito, on the other hand, was duking it out in another surprisingly close match. I would put her strength around Hinata's level, just without the magic. If this man who looked like the commander was fighting on even terms with her, he had to be good. Real lady killer too, I bet. And absolutely on par with Krishna from before. So how would it turn out? We all had our eyes glued to the big screen, watching with bated breath. Major General Minitz, dressed in his most prized tailored suit, strolled through the labyrinth. The design of his outfit was the same as any regular officer's, but the fabric was different. Every thread had been carefully selected, with magic force woven into the cloth. A single suit cost as much as a colonel's annual salary, but it offered luxury on a level even Minitz would be satisfied with. Elegance, in a word, was what Minitz was all about. That was what made his current situation so dissatisfying. War was supposed to be fought with overwhelming force, intimidating the enemy and aiming for victory without a fight. Sacrificing lives was out of the question. If your own troops were making that sacrifice, it called your commander's competence into question. That was exactly why Minitz had declared this operation a failure before it even began. Still, Minitz smiled boldly as he complained about the curse of the servant class and not being able to state the obvious out loud. He usually did not receive much attention since Kanzis serving under him tended to hog the spotlight, but Minitz himself was one of the Imperial Army's greatest heroes. Just because this war offended his fashion sense did not mean he was soft enough to abandon it. Minitz muttered that this Rimuru character enjoyed making life difficult. Sending the commander alone to some random place meant his brave men and women could be scattered and picked off one by one. Kanzis would probably find a way to survive, but that did not change the problem. He was talking to himself, not caring who heard, and in spite of all the vitriol, he looked pretty content. For the first time in a while, he felt his heart soar. He had never felt exposed to so much danger. His rank normally kept him away from the front lines. He was upper-class nobility, not some upstart, and after retiring from the military, he had an even loftier career waiting than Caligulio. He already had enough political connections to build his own faction among the government's lawmakers. The reason someone like Minitz stayed in the military was simple. He had a deeply instilled passion for fighting. He loved to see blood. Now that he had this opportunity, he could go wild to his heart's content. He had been transported to floor 78, one floor above Apito's domain. That was meant to help analyze Minitz's abilities. So he pressed through the empty field, swatting away insect swarms as he searched for the stairs leading down. Minitz sniffed that he hated bugs. Just seeing their legs flit around disgusted him, so he wanted out of there as quickly as possible. With that arrogant remark, he swung his hand to the side. That alone summoned a mighty gust of wind, reducing hundreds of insects to dust. That was Oppressor, his unique skill, and it was pretty straightforward. From psychological oppression to physically crushing matter, it affected everything in his line of vision. Anything caught in its grasp was turned into scrap, organic or not. He did not even need the theatrical arm wave. A glance could destroy most things. That power had made Minitz undefeated in battle until now. He grumbled that the insects were fragile, that he was barely seeing any resistance, and that he wished they would try harder. Literally, nobody could stop Minitz. He ran into swarms of over 8 insects on floor 78, but he killed every single one of them. They were no match at all. It was over in an instant. If you had that kind of power, you would probably be just as arrogant as him. After a few hours, Minitz found the descending stairwell. Figuring it led to deeper floors, he decided to take a leisurely break there. The leather bag around his waist was a fancy and expensive magical tool. From it, he produced a hot meal, then a magic warding bedding set, tent included, and slept as soundly as a baby. To him, this labyrinth was not even a fun diversion. The next day, he casually strode onto floor 79, and there, he finally met a worthy enemy. The attacking army wasps, silent killers as they may have been, were mown down in an instant by Minitz. No matter how tricky the monster, as long as he could lay eyes on it, the jig was up. Minitz said the monsters here were no match for him either. What a disappointment. Those bold words enraged someone else on the floor, Apito. Given his knack for catching enemies no matter how they snuck up on him, Minitz clearly had sharp magic sense. There was no point setting any more army wasps on him, so the queen herself entered the scene. Apito told him, "You are acting well beyond your abilities, human." Minitz looked her over and asked whether she could put up a bit of a fight because she did not seem too different from the rest of the bugs here. As he spoke, he stepped on the mounds of fallen wasps. Apito's rage climbed several degrees higher. Her voice went cold. "You are dead." Minitz answered, "I would like to see you try." And so the fight was on. Minitz began with a casual approach, giving Apito no credit at all. He was not being careless. He simply believed Oppressor could easily smash this foe to pieces. It did not take long to learn how naive that was. Waves of interference poured over Apito the moment she entered his sight, placing intense pressure on her. It was an invisible gravitational force. One Minitz could apply to surrounding matter and give direction. By manipulating pushing and pulling forces, he could make objects explode or implode. The only ways to oppose it were to have a body strong enough to endure the pressure, or to release some opposing directional force that canceled it out. Minitz had never met anyone who could do either. Therefore, he was invincible. It was with that absolute confidence that he unleashed his skill. But the scene he received was not what he expected. Minitz muttered, "Too late?" He had shattered only Apito's afterimage. It was not that she had seen the true nature of his power. She had noticed the directionality. If she moved quickly enough, she could escape its area of effect. And it worked. Apito asked, "Just as I thought then. Now, can you keep up with my movement?" Minitz smiled. How interesting. This would be so boring otherwise. Unleashing his abilities to the fullest, Minitz established a force field around himself and walked forward to block Apito's path. The queen was forced to fall back. The labyrinth passageways were a good 5 yards wide, but attempting to slip past Minitz would get her caught in his force field. Apito clicked her tongue. Nasty. Minitz shot back. That is what I was going to say. Neither side gave an inch. After extensive training from Hinata, Apito's moves were sharp and refined. She could even make the paladin captain sweat trying to keep up with her. But that did not mean much if she could not get close enough to attack. If Apito ever stopped, she was instantly in danger. One exposure to his pressurizing waves and she would pay for it. Apito decided that making herself known might not have been wise after all. If she could retreat to her royal chamber, she could fly around much more freely. She did not know how long Minitz's stamina would last, but if she wanted to find a way to win, she had to drag him back there. Her mind was made up. There was no shame in this retreat. Apito's basic policy was always to greedily aim for victory. Minitz did not mock her when she ran. Realizing it was a strategic retreat, he gave chase cautiously. No need to hurry. It was better to conserve his strength than overreact. In Minitz's mind, battle always had to be done with a certain elegance. If someone was going to lose, they should at least struggle in vain rather than give up. He sensed something beautiful in Apito. Unlike the other monsters, this was someone who fought with true grace. It was only natural for a fighter to choose an advantageous battlefield. He would never chide her for that. In fact, he was grateful she was doing everything she could. So he followed, never underestimating her, always thinking about how to hunt her down. They eventually arrived at a large, wide-open space with a chair placed atop a dais on one end. Minitz presumed it was the queen's throne. A fitting place then for them to settle the score. He was ready and willing to accept the enemy's offer, while arrogantly hoping she would make this entertaining. Minitz called out, "Right, is the game of tag over now?" Apito answered formally. "Yes, by my name is Apito, the insect queen, I will do my very best to entertain you here." Minitz replied, "Sounds enjoyable. I am Major General Minitz and I am here to kill you. Ready for round 2? With that bit of bravado, Minitz accelerated. He had taken a wait-and-see approach before, but now he was serious. He could not surpass Apito's speed, but he was not falling behind her either. It did not faze Apito. Rising high into the air, she laid on even more speed, making Minitz look foolish. That, too, was within Minitz's expectations. Minitz shouted, "No, you do not. You should never underestimate my power." The shout came after he released it. From the very top of the dome-shaped chamber, an invisible force field descended and trapped Apito. Controlling the gravity within, he kept her flat against the ceiling. Apito choked under the pressure. Minitz snorted and asked if it hurt. He wanted to crush her to death right there, but she was a little too strong for that. Any ordinary monster would have been flattened at this distance. He came closer. His power changed depending on distance, and as he approached, the pressure rose higher and higher, easily enough to crush someone as tough as her. Now that Apito was in his sights, he no longer had to unfold his power in every direction. Focusing everything on her practically guaranteed a quick victory. In Minitz's thoughts, the fight had been trickier than expected, but she was nothing special after all. Still, she had entertained him. He supposed he could repay her with a painless death. Minitz was not a fan of tormenting his foes. All he wanted was the rush of the fight and the thrill of victory. That was why he wanted to show Apito mercy out of pure goodwill. But Apito was not finished. She shouted, "Do not count me out yet, human. I told you I would give you my very best." With that, Apito flew back into the air, surely suffering under the pressure. Her wings were torn, her arms and legs bent in odd directions, and from antennae to stinger she looked like a wreck. But her will to fight had not faded at all. She wanted victory more desperately than anything else. Apito's resolve sharpened around a single duty. Sir Rimuru is watching this battle too. No matter how pathetic I look doing it, I must expose my enemy's skills at least. Minitz answered, "How funny. You think you can expose my power? You will be dead long before that." Once again, Minitz generated a force field around himself. With repulsion and attraction, he could drive away anyone who tried to approach and keep them planted to the ground. That was his path to finishing Apito. But Apito would not stay down. Soaring faster than Minitz could perceive, she kept her distance and tried to avoid being caught in his waves. Having no way to attack him was terribly frustrating. But her opponent did not have infinite stamina. His limit would have to come sometime. Apito waited for that moment. Would Minitz get exhausted first, or would Apito run out of steam first? The battle of endurance began. Things only started changing several hours into the contest. Following Hinata's teachings, Apito tried every possible means of attack. Her broken limbs were now gone, and she continued flying desperately on torn wings, searching for an opening. She shot poison stingers at Minitz's blind spot. She vibrated her wings to unleash razor-sharp shock waves. She summoned her army wasps to attack from all directions. All of it was done to find something, anything that could weaken Minitz's interference. What it did was wipe out her army wasps. They might have been lower in caste than her, but Apito still summoned them herself. It was impossible not to be disappointed. Even so, she kept ordering the suicide attack. Thanks to all that, Minitz was hardly unscathed. The expensive suit he had worn so proudly was in pitiful shape. All his elegance had been stripped away, revealing the increasingly desperate, evasive maneuvers beneath. Apito said through the exhaustion. "You seem tired." Minitz answered, "You too. Honestly, I am surprised you have held out this long." Apito reminded him, "Did I not tell you? No matter how pathetic I look doing it, winning is all that matters." Minitz replied, "And I agree, except I am the winner here." Both were showing amazingly contrived stoicism. They were so utterly exhausted they could barely keep standing, but they still boasted their strength to each other. Floating in midair, Apito made her declaration. Her face was stained with her own blood, but her smile was beautiful and radiant. "You have a lot of strength," she told him. "I will admit that, but you are not completely flawless. Let me promise you this. With my next attack, you are going to die." Squinting at her, Minitz curled his lips upward. "I look forward to that. In that case, let me promise you that my next blow will make all your pain go away." Neither had much strength left. If they both wanted to end it with the next shot, that showed just how little stamina remained. So they returned to full speed, no longer thinking about the consequences. Apito's plan was to anticipate which way Minitz's pressure waves would go, change her trajectory just before impact, and land a bruising tackle before he could react. Minitz anticipated this. The question in his mind was how much Apito knew about his remaining power. Could she really see when the invisible pressure waves would launch? If she could, he would have to change his response. In the end, Minitz chose to believe in himself. There was no way she could see through all of that. And at that moment, the battle was decided. The instant Minitz released his power, Apito changed direction. Not because she saw his waves, but on her own intuition, just as Minitz predicted. Minitz smiled, thinking he had won. Apito smiled too, knowing she was dead. Her attack had been built around her own death from the very start. Minitz gleefully shouted, "It is over, Queen Apito." The moment Apito felt the invisible surge of power envelop her entire body, she opened her mouth wide and attempted to launch her final move, Queen of the Needles. It was a barrage of all-powerful poison needles she would only release at the risk of death. They were created not from mystical or magical force, but from a part of Apito's own body. That made them tough enough to pierce magic steel. Enough of those, fired at point-blank range, ought to penetrate Minitz's force field. That was her conclusion. Minitz's force compressed her body at the same time the needles stabbed through his defensive field. The decisive moment had arrived. The result was a double knockout. Apito was unhappy that she failed to score a complete victory, but she was more than satisfied that she had done her part. Death, after all, was not the end. The labyrinth would resurrect you as many times as you wanted. So Apito disappeared from her throne room, awaiting her imminent rebirth. Once he saw she was gone, Minitz decided to rest quietly until his wounds healed. That attack had shattered his heart, but he was still alive. It was not enough to kill someone like him. Given enough time, the wounds would heal. Being able to throw himself into a battle like none before had filled that shattered heart with indescribable joy. Minitz thought it had been an excellent fight. He only wished he could have tasted more of it. Then he could have proved he was the strongest. Still basking in the aftermath, he found himself unsatisfied. If anything, his instincts were begging him to fight someone even stronger. Only through challenging and surpassing his limits, he thought, would he ever grow stronger. Then, like an answer to Minitz's prayers, something strange happened. A booming voice echoed across the chamber, praising the fight. The voice had the timbre of a champion, one who had made many of the worthy bow down to him before. The voice introduced himself as Zegion. "You now officially have the right to fight me. If that is what you desire, come to me." Minitz opened his eyes again, as if guided by the voice. A dark vortex had somehow appeared in front of him. Minitz wondered if this new opponent was going to entertain him. If so, it would be rude not to accept the offer. His body still needed healing, but Minitz nonetheless shot to his feet without flinching. Without a moment of fear, he headed off to accept the invitation.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.